Which is more profitable, a big business or a small business? And for the sake of this video, let's call a small business $1 million or less. I would also say maybe 3 million or less. I would be tempted to call it maybe 2 million or less. I'd be tempted to call it small business, meaning the owner can still manage most of the stuff in the business with a manager helping them. Depends on what trade you're in. My argument is generally a really small business has the potential to be more profitable on a percentage basis than a big company. But it really doesn't normally work out that way. I've got another video that talks about how to make a really small business way more profitable than a big business. But again, very few people pull that off. So on the whole, generally, the bigger businesses, I believe, are the more profitable businesses. But let's talk through this. So why is it that I do not like small businesses? They have no redundancy. If something happens to you, business is screwed. You get hurt for a month, you get hit in a head-on collision, you get hurt working, business is screwed, you could lose everything. You have no freedom. You can't go to Italy for 2 weeks. You can't do a lot of things other people with bigger businesses can do. Because it's a small business, there's no real wealth creation. It's not really sellable. Someday, yeah, you might be able to sell the accounts. It's not really a business you could sell. So you're doing all this work, you're just collecting a paycheck, where somebody building a big business is doing all the same work, collecting a paycheck and building a big net worth and wealth. Now, why might it be that a small business feels more profitable? Well, most people will think about it and they forget to factor in taking out their salary. If you've got a $500,000 business and it would cost 80 to replace you with somebody that could run it. And I don't know if I would really be certain I could replace you with somebody who could run it for only 80 and count on them sticking around long term. So I question if that's even a good example. But if I could replace you, or if it would cost me at least 80 to replace you, can't really count your 80,000 as profit, because if you weren't there, I'd have to pay somebody else. So after you take a fair and reasonable salary, and most people don't, they take like 40 grand and then they take lots of distributions here or there to pay the car payment, the house payment, buy this thing, go on a vacation, and they don't not really clear on how much money they're taking out of their business. Like, what's the real profit number? For most people, it's not as profitable as they think because they're counting their salary. Or another reason why they think their smaller business is profitable is because they have no investment cost. So what happens is they buy a truck, they buy equipment, and then they have no expenses. They have no capital investment, no asset expenses for years. Everything's great, making lots of money. And then one day it's like, whoa, what's wrong? Something's happened to my business. I got to replace the truck. I got to replace the equipment. And all of a sudden they incur all this expense, and that year is horrible. And they hit their credit cards. They maybe use a line of credit. And then kind of from then on, they're a little behind. Things aren't quite what they were for all those years when things were paid for, because they're not averaging their capital, their asset expenses across all the years. They're just like incurring it. It's paid for. I'm good. And so some years look great. Some years look bad. When you average them all out, is it really that profitable? Or maybe things are going great because you've got a couple really fantastic team members. But then one day, one leaves or two leave. And then the business is never quite as good again. Maybe it's making money and it's good money, but it just kind of sucks because you're dependent on a few people that are okay versus a big client base with some incredible people and some okay people that won't be on the team for that long because you'll eventually replace them. Like, there's just so much nuance here. And there's so many reasons why a small business to many will feel really good, but it is really good for a period of time, but not for the long term. So the advantage that a big company has over a small company, other than the redundancy, the freedom, and the wealth that I mentioned a minute ago, they can take all their expenses and their overhead, like their office, and spread that out over much more revenue. And that's an advantage. So their cost structure is less. That you have no economies of scale when you're small. You don't have the money, maybe, to go to buy chemicals and equipment and buy them all in December and buy down the costs. Your vendor's trying to hit their quota. They're trying to make a sales number. And they'll give you a 20% off if you'll pre-buy for the whole year right now and write them a check so they can make their quarter, make their year. Well, you can't capitalize on opportunities like that generally when you're small. Bigger companies can. They can prepay. They prepay their software for 1 year and get a discount. Prepay their whatever for a year and get a discount. And if it's 10% or 20% discount, that stuff adds up. That all contributes to the bottom line. You have no marketing efficiency, so you spend the money to design a marketing piece and distribute that. Let's just use a postcard. Not that a lot of small companies are doing postcards, but it'll make my example. You got to hire a designer to design it. Then you've got to print it. The print runs more expensive because it's a low quantity. Then you got to mail it. And those costs are averaged over a small number of people that you're marketing to. A big company that's marketing to tons of people can average those costs, the printing and design costs, over a much bigger number of prospects that they're going out to. So I gave you a couple examples here, but there's those types of examples are all throughout a bigger business, and you just don't have any of those economies of scale in a smaller business. And so for that reason, oftentimes a very well-run big business is actually more profitable. I'd also say that there's this middle ground. There's this place where you could, if you're running a really good business when you're small, you could be pretty profitable. And then when you get big, you could be really profitable. But there's this middle ground of, I tend to think of it as like $1.5 million to $5 million. It varies by trade, by industry. It's just sort of a no man's land. You're still making money, but your profits get kicked in the face pretty hard because maybe you're growing kind of quick during that time. You're scaling up trucks, you're scaling up equipment, you're upgrading your office, you're hiring more management, you're upgrading some of your people, you're having to do more marketing now to overcome churn. You can't just rely on referrals. There's just all this stuff that is happening during that phase of building the infrastructure and the foundation of your business. It really eats into profits. And so that's why I think a lot of people are like, it's just so much more profitable to be small. And yeah, there's truth in it. In the fact that it might be more profitable to be small than during that no man's land phase. But once you get to the other side of that, it solves for redundancy, creates wealth, creates freedom, and you make more profit. And that's why I'm just a massive advocate of building a bigger business.